Hi everybody, Brett here at Tabletop Sagas. So, picture this. About a week and a half ago, one of my mates got in contact with me and said, do you want to play a small-scale sci-fi mass combat game? Not going to mention which one, but I'm sure you'll guess which one easily enough. And, well, I said yes, because I always want to try and play more games with mates if I can. And a couple of problems though. One, don't have an army for it, and I've never actually played the game before. So, sounds like a little bit of a challenge. Well, just to make things even more difficult for myself, I actually procrastinated for a good few days, and now I only have a week left in which to print everything and paint it all up. Can we do it? Let's find out. Spoiler alert, by the way, no, we absolutely can't. But I am speeding up with my painting, and I thought it might be interesting to try and challenge myself to at least see how much I could actually get painted in the time. Now, let's talk strategy. If I had any hope of getting this army to a playable state, I knew I had to start with the infantry. There was no way I was going to glue these models to their bases and then attempt to paint them, so painting sticks were a must really. That way I could ensure on getting them to a decent enough quality before worrying about the basing, but it did mean that the infantry absolutely had to be my main priority for this project. Thankfully for the infantry in this game, their armour consists mainly of a single primary colour and then just some detailing on top. This made them a perfect candidate for my trusty airbrush. I knew that I could get a base coat on really quick and do a bit of a zenithal highlight of a bluish grey, and that should get me pretty much where I needed to be pretty quickly. Then in theory all I had to do was paint in the weapons and the highlights, and I should be able to knock them out in relatively decent time, and certainly within the time scale that I had for the project. But as luck would have it, my airbrush had other plans. It decided to be a little bit temperamental and was clogging left, right and centre. Talk about frustrating. But hey, painting's more of an art than a science, right? My usual mix of 50-50 paint and airbrush thinner just wasn't going to cut it for this project. So I went back to the drawing board and spent some of my already very limited time in experimenting to find a new formula that would work. I didn't need to be too worried about accuracy, but instead what I needed was to prioritise reliability of getting the paint through the nozzle with minimal issues. After some trial and error, and admittedly a bit of a eureka moment with some Vallejo flow improver, I finally managed to get things back on track in a really simple way. Playing around with the ratios of the three products, so the paint, the thinner and the flow improver, I found that I could actually keep my old mix, but adding in a few squirts of flow improver into a cup full of the original ratio actually did the trick perfectly. Now, this new formula definitely lost a lot in terms of accuracy, so I will still be using my old formula for times when I do need that. Check out my Mongol video if you want to see what I mean by that one. But it's a great tool to have in my belt for projects where I need to just be blasting models with one colour in the future. With the infantry's base coat sorted, it was time to add some extra flair to these. A bright red for the shoulder pads and silver for the weapons to provide just the right amount of contrast, with the intention to dull this all down in the next step. And speaking of the next step, that was a good old-fashioned wash with some trusty Nuln Oil. This stuff really is, as has been said many times, talent in a bottle for projects like these. A healthy coat over an entire mini, and a bit of care to avoid pooling, and they were really starting to come to life. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Painting over 200 minis in one go is, honestly, it's no joke. It's tedious, it's time consuming, and I definitely don't recommend this if this is your first product, or even one of your first few products. If that's the case, just take things slow, paint a little bit at a time, but as a one-off, if you're feeling confident, then chuck on some podcasts or something to listen to, maybe some music in the background, and do get ready for hours of basically painting the same thing over and over again on repetitive tiny minis. Sure, it's not exactly going to be a walk in a park, not by a long shot, but it's part of the process for this large army batch painting style, and it is oddly satisfying when it does all start to come together. And that's the word you kind of need to be focusing on here. It's not necessarily about enjoyment, fun, exciting. It's satisfying. When you do see it done, it feels really good. And that's a different kind of energy that I think you need to draw from a project like this. Next up, we're already onto the basing. Well, I say already, this has been quite a bit of work to get to this point for myself. I've just edited it down to the highlights for use. This is where things start to get, shall we say, a little bit tricky. Some of you may have noticed that unlike most small-scale minis from pretty much most other companies, these ones that I'm painting today don't have bases on their feet. So the only point of contact for any glue is the soles of those tiny little feet. And superglue and tiny feet turned out to be a little bit of a sticky situation, if you will excuse the pun there. Needless to say, there was more than a little bit of swearing, and my hands were covered in glue by the end of it, but taking things slowly and just trying to be delicate when applying the glue, I could get through it. You can as well. On a serious note though, super glue induced headaches and eye irritation from the fumes and hanging your head over them while it's drying. It's no joke. When you're working with this many minis, this is going to take a long time. There's no way around it. So it's best you have to do it in a well ventilated room and only do it in short bursts at a time. For me, that was no more than 20 or 30 minutes of gluing in one sitting. And take the time in between there to leave the room, clear your head in between, and even better if you can, like I did, actually go outside and just get a couple of minutes of fresh air to really clear things out. Otherwise, you are going to start suffering from headaches, potentially getting eye irritation and things like that I mentioned. So if you try this, please do be careful with that one. But fast forward a bit, got them all on their bases, and things are starting to look like it's ready for action. Honestly, these have got to a point after just a solid weekend's work where they could easily be fielded on the table at this point, but I still do have some time left on the clock, so why not add some flair? I'm a massive fan of the old sand plus goblin green bases that were everywhere when I started back in the hobby, and I love paying homage to that. So I broke out the Geek Gaming Scenics base readies that I've used in other projects, slapped some basing glue on here, and got the basing materials stuck on. For this game, the norm does seem to be at the minute to do city rubble style bases, but personally, I like the contrast between the sci-fi warriors and the more natural setting that's implied by these bases. I'm sure a bit of a look around, you could find some city bases online somewhere, but I'm happy with my MDF circles and this method instead. Next up as well, we do have the plasma weapons on the special weapon units. They did get a little bit of a touch up with some white paint on the plasma coils, followed by a bright green to make a glow effect that would really pop, I think, against the blue-grey armour. Now, in this world, blue is the traditional colour of plasma weapons, but I was aware with the armour that really wasn't going to have the contrast that I was looking for, hence that's why I went with the green. I also as well spent a bit of time doing some touch up on the infantry squad markings, painted them in a white. I didn't worry too much about getting them exactly perfect, really sharp lines on the arrows and things. It was more about just giving the impression that they were there because, well, if anybody can see them and realise that they're not painted correctly, they are too close to my minis as far as I'm concerned. And there you have it. It was actually quick. Well, relatively quick for this project, at least. It was still many hours of painting involved, but we do some quick black base rims and I've actually finished the army. Well, the infantry part of the army at least. For sure, they're not actually at a display quality or anything, but given the time frame, I'm pretty impressed with how they turned out. Things like the squad markings that I've mentioned are roughly slapped on, and there are bits where my brush has caught parts of the minis that they shouldn't have, and the armour's base colour in general could probably use a bit of an edge highlight at points to help it pop as well. But if someone can notice any of those small defects on the gaming table, well, as I mentioned, they're too close to my minis and they probably need to step back a bit. So some of you may be wondering, if I'm painting a whole army, well, what about the walkers, the titans and the tanks? Well, don't worry, I have something planned for you if you are wondering that. I didn't want to try and put everything into one video, but I have been working on those in the background, and I do have a few days left for the game with my mate, so that will be coming out in the near future. I do think though that the next video in the channel will be changing gears a little bit. I think I'm going to go back to some of the historics that I've been working on. I was at a convention a couple of weeks ago now and picked up some pretty cool things for that. So be sure to keep an eye out for the next video coming soon. I've been Brett, and I will catch you in the next one.